Well, Mr. Ali Maisam Nazary, welcome to the Oxford Policy Pod here at the Blavatnik School of Government. I'll give a quick background onto the topic that we'll be discussing today on Afghanistan, 20 years of U.S. presence there, August 2021, the withdrawal of the United States, and the role that the National Resistance Front has played throughout that time. The September 11 attacks drew the United States and its allies into Afghanistan with a twin mandate to dismantle al-Qaeda and deny it safe haven, and to build, in the rebel Taliban rule, a functioning modern state. For 2 decades, that project consumed trillions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives, and the sustained institutional energy of the Western world, producing real but deeply uneven gains, including a fragile civil society and a state that was always more dependent on external life support than its architects cared to admit. Then in August 2021, that edifice collapsed with a speed that shocked even those who had long predicted its fragility. The Afghan security forces dissolved, the Ghani government evaporated, and the Taliban walked back into Kabul without a fight. What followed has been nearly 5 years of a regime that has systematically dismantled the rights of women and girls, consolidated authoritarian control, and left Afghanistan one of the most isolated and impoverished nations on earth, recognized only by the Russian Federation, yet engaged by many, primarily its neighbors, including the People's Republic of China. Into that vacuum, the National Resistance Front, led by Ahmed Massoud and Ali Nazary, operating largely from exile, has positioned itself as the principal organized opposition, seeking to keep alive both the armed resistance and the political case that another Afghanistan is still possible. Here to speak with us on this topic today is Mr. Ali Maisam Nazary, the head of foreign relations and founding member of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan and senior advisor to Ahmed Massoud. In his current capacity, he manages the global diplomatic affairs and international engagement of the National Resistance Front, or the NRF. He is also a historian, a researcher focused on the history of Islam, Central Asia, South Asia, nationalism, nation building, and ethnic conflict. He double majored in political science and Iranian studies at UCLA, graduating cum laude in 2012, and served as a research assistant in UCLA's political science department. He later earned a master's degree in comparative politics, specializing in nationalism and ethnic conflict from the London School of Economics in 2013. His graduate dissertation examined the role of ethnic politics in Afghanistan from 1978 to 2001. Since 2013, he has been actively involved in Afghanistan's political affairs, including as Director of Media Affairs and confidential assistant during Dr. Abdullah Abdullah's presidential campaign, as an Afghan and Central Asian government relations specialist at Bellwether Partners, and as president of the Massoud Foundation, USA. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Claire. It's great to be here.
So we're going to start on the structural history of Afghanistan and focusing on the collapse in August 2021. Before August 2021, Afghanistan had 2 decades of U.S. partnership, billions in aid, training, and institutional investment. Yet the Afghan army dissolved in days and the Ghani government evaporated and the Taliban came back in. From your vantage point, from inside that system, what was the single most consequential structural failure, not of will or courage, but a structural design from within the system that made that collapse possible at the speed that it happened? And how honestly do you think that that failure has been reckoned with, both in Washington, but also from Afghans inside and outside of Afghanistan?
Well, the collapse that occurred in 2021 was multifaceted and multidimensional. It has many factors and reasons why such a collapse happened after 20 years of NATO presence in Afghanistan, after 20 years of a democratic republic being established. And we cannot isolate just one of these factors as the main reason of the collapse. Yet, I saw it coming earlier than many others did. What happened way before 2021, especially if we start in 2014, or even go back to the formation and formulation of the Constitution in 2003 and 2004, the highly centralized presidential unitary system that came into being because of this constitution was one of the factors that led to the ultimate collapse of the republic. Basically, in 2000 and 2004, when the constitution was drafted, they brought and consolidated all authority and powers into the institution of the presidency, into the hands of the president. And in a country like Afghanistan, such a system doesn't work. It basically damaged and created obstacles for state building and even nation building, on the other hand, after 2004. Because in a country made up of solely ethnic minorities, no one being a majority, handing over power to one person in one city is basically a recipe for catastrophe. And so that was the first mistake in 2004 by drafting and ratifying such a constitution. But in 2014, we did face an impasse, a political impasse, where you had all sides fighting over one position, that was the presidency, because the type of competition, political competition that came into being after 2004 was a zero-sum game. One side won everything, the other side was the ultimate loser, lost everything. Without any type of coalition building, being part of the political structure and the constitution of the country. Not even having a prime ministership. Historically in Afghanistan, we've always had the position of prime minister. And the discussions that led up to this constitution in 2004, they actually intentionally removed the position of prime ministership that existed in the draft of the constitution. So no place and room for power sharing. And so by 2014, we did face this impasse. And the events of 2014 further delegitimized the political system. A national unity government came into being because of the electoral crisis in 2014, which led up to the coalition government, which was highly fragile. And when this government came into being, I had this thinking and calculation that this government will ultimately fall. And the direction that this government is on is towards a cliff. And for this reason, I was one of the first people to leave the National Unity Government. It was formed towards the end of September of 2014. I left it in October of 2014, so within a few weeks. And returned to the political opposition, working on reform. Electoral reform, because we did face pervasive corruption and a massive fraud in the 2014 elections. So we needed electoral reform in Afghanistan and constitutional reform. And from 2014 to 2021, we were mainly focused on bringing reform within the power structure of the country and the political system, a more decentralized system where it could strengthen accountability, could distribute power, and everyone around the country from all communities and groups can see themselves in decision-making and in policy-making. One of the reasons why instability increased after 2014 is because of this. Because when Mr. Ashraf Ghani became president, he started further consolidating power, took authority away from the limited authority that existed outside of Kabul. He started the process of shifting that authority to Kabul, started shifting authority from the ministries to the presidential palace. And if you see the graph of Afghanistan's instability from 2014 to 2021, you'll see that it was a decline and it was a downward slope. In 2014, when I was campaigning, basically most of the north was stable.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't any insurgency in the north. At night, we were traveling to Badakhshan province, to Qunduz, to Takhar, to Mazar Sharif. The same in central Afghanistan, western Afghanistan, parts of eastern Afghanistan, even in southern Afghanistan. But within a year, in September 2015, the Taliban were able to capture the first city,
Mm-hmm.
which was Qunduz, in the north, which was the most stable area within Afghanistan up to 2015.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a major factor. It wasn't the only factor that led up to the collapse. Of course, there's other factors. The negotiations that started in 2018,
Mm-hmm.
it legitimized the Taliban. It accelerated the process of disintegration, meaning the government was on a trajectory of disintegration. Yet the Doha talks and the ultimate agreement that was reached in February of 2020, it accelerated the collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew this. We warned American officials in 2018, 2019. If the United States wants to leave Afghanistan, just announce tomorrow that we're leaving Afghanistan and leave. No one is going to attack the United States while it's leaving.
Mm.
But signing an agreement that's actually a surrender and legitimizing the Taliban and demoralizing Afghanistan's armed forces and limiting the activities of Afghanistan's armed forces is going to accelerate the collapse.
Right. Right. So on the Doha Agreement, so negotiations began as early as 2018, as you mentioned, and then it was later signed in February 2020. It's now widely seen as a turning point, not just strategically but psychologically, signaling to Afghans, both in government and civilians, that no matter what the situation was like on the ground, a U.S. Retreat was inevitable, regardless of the conditions. How much did that agreement and the way it was conducted without the Afghan government at the table shape what happened in August 2021? And what do you think that tells us about the limits of being a dependent partner to a great power such as the United States?
Well, I received rumors that the United States has decided to negotiate with the Taliban directly in, I believe it was early summer of 2018.
Mhm.
And I passed this message to many political figures within Afghanistan, including Mr. Massoudi, leader of the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. And I knew this would become a disaster.
Mm.
And I decided, I was in DC and New York during that time. I left everything and went to Afghanistan because I knew that by directly negotiating with the Taliban and excluding Afghanistan's government and other political forces of Afghanistan, that this was a disaster. This would potentially become a disaster. And during our meetings with the Americans, especially with Mr. Zalmay Khalilzad, who was the chief negotiator of the United States during that time, we told him directly, Mr. Massoud told him that you shouldn't exclude Afghanistan's government. Afghanistan's government should be around the table,
Mhm.
should be one side of the negotiations. Because we have this experience going back to the 1980s, when the Soviet Union directly negotiated with the Mujahideen in the late 80s, early 90s. It delegitimized the government that the Soviets were supporting for more than a decade.
Mhm.
And after the Soviets started negotiating with the Mujahideen parties, no one wanted to directly negotiate with the communist regime in Kabul.
Mhm.
So whatever reconciliation process that existed during that time, it was delegitimized, and ultimately that government collapsed too.
Mm.
And we told Mr. Khalilzad that learn from the past. You were part of that history too.
Mm.
He told us, no, don't worry. The United States will not repeat what the Soviets or the Russians did. And the United States will stay in Afghanistan until the last stage of a peace agreement.
Mm.
That was the promise that was made. that the United States isn't going to abandon Afghanistan, that the United States will stay, will observe, and implement whatever peace agreement reaches between the United States and the Taliban, and then afterwards between the Taliban and Afghanistan's government.
Right.
But actions showed something different. The Doha Agreement limited the capacity of Afghanistan's armed forces. The Doha Agreement signaled to American allies that the U.S. is going to leave, and so they started preparing their contingency plans on how to leave Afghanistan. And the most important side that the Afghanistan's armed forces was dependent on were the contractors. Afghanistan's armed forces, they came into being after 2003 and was built based on the image of the United States armed forces. Highly dependent on contractors, on technology, on intelligence, and so forth. And Afghanistan's armed forces was highly dependent on the United States when it came to intelligence support, when it came to American contractors, maintaining everything that the armed forces had, including the Air Force, American logistical support, and so forth. So as soon as the United States signaled that we're negotiating with the Taliban, excluding Afghanistan's government, and then when they signed it in February 2020, these people started leaving. So it weakened Afghanistan's armed forces. And gradually the armed forces, they were demoralized too. They saw that, well, yesterday we were being encouraged to fight against terrorists, against the Taliban, against Al-Qaeda and the others. Today, we're being told not to fight against them. Or our fight has to be limited in scope. And so this demoralized a force that were fighting in the battlefield for more than a decade. From 2014 up to 2021, the casualties of Afghanistan's ANDSF exceeded more than 80,000. So it's not that they didn't want to fight or they didn't fight. It's just the support that was given to them was withdrawn. And the way that the United States structured this armed forces was, as long as the United States is in Afghanistan, they will survive. As soon as the United States leaves Afghanistan, they are going to crumble and collapse. And the United States knew this. So in our perspective, as I mentioned in the previous question, the Doha Agreement actually accelerated the collapse.
Right.
When we needed more time to reform the political system, to put Afghanistan on a different trajectory, with the support of our allies, including the United States.
Right. Let's fast forward to 15 August 2021, when Kabul collapsed. Walk us through where you, Ahmed Massoud, and other NRF leadership were on that day, and how the events played out.
Well, we were all in Kabul on August 15th, 2021. I just returned from a trip from DC. I was in DC during the last week of July, basically doing my last bit of lobbying and advocacy for the survival of a democratic Afghanistan. And for, of course, the resistance. We knew that a resistance has to take shape because we knew that the collapse is coming. We told everyone when we met President Macron in March of 2021, we told him that. Before that, any delegation that came to us in Kabul. And we started consulting with our people from 2018 up to 2021. We went to the remotest village in Afghanistan, to villages around the country, asking them, what should we do? And the message that we received is, we have to prepare ourselves. And so we were in the preparatory phases of our current resistance. Yeah, we didn't know the collapse would happen on August 15th. So when we woke up in the morning, we started receiving rumors that the Taliban have entered Kabul. And so I stayed in Kabul because that was the instructions I was given by Mr. Masood, and was told to leave Afghanistan after he arrived in Panjshir, but he went to Kabul airport. Of course, there were a lot of obstacles. Not many wanted him to move to Panjshir and to declare resistance. So we were facing a lot of problems with that. We were receiving a lot of messages from individual countries that if Mr. Masood wants to leave Afghanistan, they are willing to host us, especially a message that we received from President Macron that he will send a private plane for Mr. Masood and us to leave for France because he was worried about his security. But Ahmad Masood decided to stay in Afghanistan and to continue the fight for freedom. And so with all the risks, with empty hands, with not much hope left, he decided to return to his hometown, to his home province of Panjshir. When he returned there, when he arrived in Panjshir, thousands of Afghanistan's ANDSF forces, many former politicians, and the people gathered around him, and we declared the National Resistance Front of Afghanistan. In the meantime, I was in Kabul. I was in hiding. I couldn't use my own name and identification. So I was basically moving from one location to another, trying to find a path to enter the airport. That took a few days. And ultimately, I believe it was August 18th, with the help of Americans and the French, I was able to enter Kabul airport, and then I was extracted out of Afghanistan to basically pursue and manage the diplomatic affairs of the NRF.
And how long was Mr. Masood in Panjshir before he had to leave, before the Taliban went into Panjshir Valley, and then their safety was compromised, and then they had to leave?
So he was there for a few months.
Okay.
And then he started going in and out because the Taliban didn't take all of Panjshir at once. And they're still not in control of all of Panjshir. So he was able to move to other parts of Panjshir and then to move in and out of Panjshir after that. So it wasn't it didn't happen within August of 2021, but basically our forces are still there today. Our commanders are still there. And although Afghanistan has been sidelined in the media and has been completely forgotten by the international community, there is still a fight and a resistance by the brave men and women of Afghanistan on the ground today.
Definitely. And on the modern look at Afghanistan, when it comes to human rights, of course, this is what definitely takes the forefront of the media when it comes to Afghanistan these days. The Taliban's rollback of women's rights is without modern precedent in its totality. Girls are banned from education beyond primary school, besides madrasas or Islamic education, and women have been removed from most of their professions, besides a few women-only markets in Bamyan, like the one I saw in 2024, and also private security contractors for hotels and airports. But beyond the headlines, in your view, what are the less reported human rights dynamics that the outside world is largely missing when it comes to Afghanistan, whether it's affecting men, minorities such as the Hazaras, returnees maybe from Iran, or from other specific regions within Afghanistan that you believe deserve more attention?
I believe there's a lot of human rights violations and atrocities that are being overlooked, that aren't being reported. And there are many countries that are seeing this, but are turning a blind eye towards it. And to just give you a few examples, one is the recent decision. It's not that recent now. I believe it's been a year, where the Taliban's so-called supreme leader signed a decree that slavery is legal in Afghanistan. Meaning in the 21st century, Afghanistan is, I think, the only country that has legalized and revived the institution of slavery. And no one is reporting about this. We don't know who the Taliban are going to enslave. There are many communities that they consider as subhumans or as human beings that don't deserve equal rights. For example, women to them are not equal to men in any shape or form or in any way. Women are subhumans. They're devoid of reasoning and rationality and so forth. And for this reason, the way women are being treated as today are they're being treated as slaves. Women have been completely erased from public life. They don't possess their basic rights as human beings, as citizens of that country. And as every day passes, this is worsening.
Right.
But it's not only women. The same with men, especially from different communities. When it comes to religious minorities, especially the Shias inside Afghanistan, whether it's the Twelver Shias or the Ismaili Shias, they're persecuted today. The Twelver Shias during the 20 years and the Ismaili and other religious communities, they possess equal rights. It was enshrined in the Constitution. They lost all of that. There's texts now being published by Taliban authorities that are saying that Twelver Shiism is unacceptable, that they should be converted to Sunni Islam. The same with Ismailis. Right now, we're seeing this firsthand in Badakhshan, where Ismaili Shia Muslims are being forcefully converted to Sunni Islam. To the Taliban, Ismaili Shia Islam isn't Islam. It's basically blasphemy and it's sacrilegious and is detached from Islam in their perspective. And so Ismaili Islam doesn't deserve to exist. And we're seeing a process of forceful conversion in Badakhshan province and Baghlan province and so forth, which isn't being reported, of course.
Right.
Afghanistan's other religious minorities, the Hindus and Sikhs, are leaving the country. For the first time in history, Afghanistan is losing its religious diversity. Afghanistan has always had religious minorities, although it's been a dominant Muslim country for maybe 1,200 years or 1,100 years. But we've always had minorities, whether it was the Hindus, the Sikhs, the Jews, the Christians. And gradually, because of the Taliban, whether it was their first rule in the late 90s or now, Afghanistan is losing its religious diversity. And another aspect when it comes to human rights, right now, Afghanistan's prisons is full. It's maxed out when it comes to its capacity. And they're not criminals. They're political prisoners. They're rounding up youth in Kabul, in the provinces, and not based on any evidence or anything. They're throwing them into prisons. Why? So they could create fear within the population. So it's a preemptive act on their part to create that fear that, okay, if you guys enter politics, or if we see an increase of political participation, or if you join the resistance and so forth, this is your fate.
Right.
And right now, the prisons, international organizations for ICRC and others, all of them know this. Afghanistan's prisons is full of civilians, of innocent men and women, and political prisoners. people who are accused of things that they haven't done. They're accused of being an NRF member. They're being accused of opposing the Taliban when they weren't politically active.
Mm.
And the international community isn't taking this into consideration, especially countries that uphold human rights. For example, the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the European Union is trying to engage with the Taliban or granting them concessions, handing over Afghanistan's embassies to them.
Mm-hmm.
And now a Taliban delegation has been invited by the European Commission.
Right.
How can all these human rights atrocities be ignored and at the same time legitimize a group that stands against every single universal value, especially countries who uphold, so-called uphold all of these values and try to brand themselves as the protectors of these values in our day and age?
Yeah. No, it's a absolutely fantastic point. Another modern development that from the past few months is the Pakistan-Afghanistan war. Since late February, Pakistan has engaged in open military conflict with the Afghan Taliban, conducting airstrikes on targets across Afghanistan, including Kabul and Kandahar, targeting military targets, but also targeting schools, and also have hit the drug rehabilitation center in Kabul. Pakistan declared it an open war and dubbed it Operation Ghazab al-Haq. The NRF released a statement supporting the Pakistani airstrikes and claimed that its own operations against Taliban forces have occurred during the conflict. I find it interesting since Pakistan created and sheltered the Taliban for a few decades, and now it's bombing them. Does this represent a genuine strategic opportunity for the NRF and for Afghanistan's democratic opposition? Or does it risk drawing the resistance into a proxy role for a Pakistani agenda? And how do you ensure the NRF is not simply trading one patron's manipulation for another?
Well, to answer this question, we have to go back into history a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, from 1947 onwards, there has been distrust between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the roots of this distrust is because of many policies that Afghanistan adopted. I believe the people of Afghanistan should critique the policies Afghanistan adopted and implemented after 1947 that caused this distrust. For 30 years, it was Afghanistan that supported proxy groups against Pakistan,
Mm-hmm.
that supported separatism within Pakistan, that basically aligned with India against Pakistan, that voted against Pakistan in 1947 in the United Nations, voted against Pakistan's membership within the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it caused Pakistan for the next 30 years, 40 years, to fund, support, and basically establish proxy groups inside Afghanistan.
Mm-hmm.
And to take and to adopt a strategy that has backfired on it today.
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan's thinking was if an extremist Islamic group comes to power, a radical Islamist group like the Taliban, a tribal group, that it can basically uproot and eradicate the roots of nationalism and irredentist claims and separatism, that it's all the source being the governments in Kabul, that a radical Islamist group would naturally align itself with Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
And that that group can serve Pakistan's interests and can alleviate whatever concerns Pakistan has when it comes to Afghanistan, aligning itself with India, supporting separatists within Pakistan, and so forth. Yet, from the 90s onwards, we've been warning Pakistan that this strategy is going to backfire. The national hero of Afghanistan, the late Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, warned Pakistan that the Taliban shouldn't be trusted, that dominant that a Taliban dominated Afghanistan is in no one's interest. They're a destabilizing force, a force of destruction, not only for the people of Afghanistan, but for the region. And the Pakistanis realized this after 2021. They realized this through the hard way when they faced the consequences, which we've been warning them for decades. And of course, the Taliban today are supporting groups that are aiming to overthrow Pakistan's government, groups that are trying to disintegrate Pakistan geographically, separatists and terrorist groups and so forth. And as every day passes, the threat against Pakistan is increasing. And so I believe this is a golden opportunity for the people of Afghanistan and the people of Pakistan to come together, reach a consensus over their future. Not now, of course, we've been facing the consequences of this policy and strategy for the past 50 years. Now the Pakistanis are facing it too. We should come together and work on a strategy, on a new path that can lead to an era of amity and trust and cooperation and collaboration between the two nations and between the two countries. And the National Resistance Front, we believe that our priority, especially when it comes to our foreign policy, is to build trust with our neighbors, especially Pakistan, based on our interests and their interests. We have our interests. Pakistan has their interests. We should address our interests. We should address our concerns. We should address the elephant in the room. And I believe this is the best opportunity to do that because Pakistanis have reached this realization too. And by using this opportunity, we could shape a future for both people that can result into stability, peace, cooperation, and build a new South Central Asia that both countries can serve as the crossroads, of course.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And you touched on this earlier, but the NRF's current military and political reality. The NRF claims to have conducted over 400 targeted operations across 19 provinces between March 2024 and March 2025, and has shifted its operational focus towards guerrilla warfare. But Western powers have limited their engagement to political dialogue through the Vienna process, explicitly refusing to supply weapons to avoid fueling a broader civil war. After 5 years of resistance without significant international military support, what is your honest assessment of the NRF's capacity to bring about meaningful change? Is the current strategy one of survival and legitimacy building, or do you genuinely believe armed resistance can tip the balance, and in what timeline? Especially given, as you mentioned earlier, that the European Union is slowly toying with the idea of inviting the Taliban delegation to Europe. And there does seem to be a realist check of if a government does have to interact with Afghanistan, they have to interact with the Taliban's government in some way, shape, or form for issues such as immigration, maybe border security, especially with the neighbors. So how does the NRF strategy kind of fit into this reality?
Well, the NRF's efforts is multi-pronged. We have our resistance and arm track. We have our political efforts inside and outside of Afghanistan. Because one thing that we know is the current situation isn't going to continue. Afghanistan is on a path where a power vacuum is inevitable. The Taliban is not a group that is well versed in governance. And as every day passes, they're having difficulties with this. It's a group of illiterate mullahs who lack experience, who lack leadership, who lack discipline. And they're mismanaging everything right now. And they're losing legitimacy. And it's fractured. There's different factions that is competing over power and resources. And this is becoming more overt as every day passes. So we have to prepare ourselves for a scenario where a power vacuum will come into being. Because if we're not prepared for that, then you will have the worst case scenario, which is not one terrorist group, but multiple terrorist groups take over the country. You have ISIS right now operating in Afghanistan. You have Al Qaeda. You have 20 other terrorist groups. So you need a force, or you need forces that represent the interests of Afghanistan's people, who can establish the rule of law, who are in favor of equal rights to all citizens, who are struggling for freedom and justice within the country, to prepare themselves. And this is what the NRF is doing. We're preparing ourselves, we're continuing our resistance. So once that power vacuum comes into being, we're able to take over that power vacuum to prevent a catastrophe. Because if we're not prepared and a catastrophe happens, it's going to be a catastrophe on a global level.
Right.
One. Two is, of course, we need to politically prepare ourselves too. One of the weaknesses of the post-2001 era was there wasn't much political preparedness on the part of the opposition when Bonn happened in 2001 and December of 2000. And everything happened rapidly, and so there wasn't time to build consensus, to build a coalition of different political forces, and to reach conclusions on how Afghanistan should be shaped after 2001. And I went into what happened with the Constitution and everything earlier. So we understood this based on our past experiences, that we need a political process that starts from today. So in 2022, we founded the Vienna process. It's called the Vienna Process for a Democratic Afghanistan. We started with only 20 political and civil groups in 2022. Today we have more than 60, 70 groups. We've had 5 meetings. We are formulating a strategic framework today on how an alternative political structure can come into being. So we want to move in an orderly fashion. So when that power vacuum comes into being, not only are we militarily prepared for it, but politically too. And this is the purpose of the Vienna process.
How do you think that power vacuum will come to be?
It's very difficult to say how and which scenario will transpire, but there's many ways. Right now, with the campaigns that Pakistan is pursuing, it's weakening the Taliban. The Taliban are having a lot of difficulties. We know this based on our intelligence. The competition between the different factions of the Taliban is another key factor that can lead to a power vacuum. As every day passes, the conflict between Kabul and Kandahar is exacerbating. The rift is deepening. Right now, just in the last week, we are seeing an insurgency within Badakhshan from within the Taliban. So one faction feeling marginalized has rose up against the rest. And then you have the activities of other terrorist groups in Afghanistan too, which is destabilizing. So it can come in different shapes and forms, but it's coming. Because the current situation is unmanageable, and the Taliban are an exclusive group. They're not accepting all of their members, and this process was started back in 2021, where they started marginalizing certain factions within the Taliban. But as every day passes, it's increasing. And in a country like Afghanistan, whenever power is centralized within the hands of one person and within the hands of one tribe, that government, that system, that regime has never survived. the Taliban aren't an exception when it comes to this.
Right. I'd like to pivot a bit into your academic work on ethnic conflict, speaking of this topic, and nation building in Afghanistan. Resistance movements have historically struggled to build coalitions across ethnic lines, as you mentioned, and their NRF draws heavily from Tajik and Hazara communities. So, how do you make a credible case to Pashtun Afghans, who make up the plurality of the population, that the NRF represents a national project and is not a replay of Northern Alliance politics? And can a federal model actually hold a country together that has never successfully centralized in the first place?
Well, I believe our vision and political doctrine basically solves whatever concerns others are having around Afghanistan. The NRF isn't an ethnic movement.
Mhm.
It's a movement for all of Afghanistan citizens because we're not fighting for the freedom and rights of a specific ethnic group. And we believe the Pashtuns are facing discrimination as much as Hazaras are facing it, Tajiks are facing, Uzbeks are facing it.
Mm.
Because even within the Pashtun population, it's only a few tribes within hundreds of tribes who have taken over power. For example, the Achikzai tribe is being massacred in Kandahar today.
Mhm.
The Barakzais and the Popalzais have been completely marginalized from Kandahari politics.
Mhm.
And so it's not only discrimination within a specific part of Afghanistan, it's throughout the country. And our vision for the future of Afghanistan is completely different than what has happened previously. What we're asking for and what we're struggling for is a democratic Afghanistan. Afghanistan had a democratic government from 2001 up to 2021,
Mhm.
but it lacked the other two components that we're struggling for,
Mhm.
which is pluralism and decentralization.
Mhm.
So, a democratic, pluralistic, decentralized Afghanistan where every single citizen enjoys equal rights. That has been our vision since 2021.
Mhm.
We need to accept and endorse the idea that Afghanistan is made up of ethnic minorities. No one is a majority.
Mhm.
Afghanistan is a multicultural society. It's made up of different identities. And the only way that Afghanistan can survive in the future is to embrace multiculturalism, pluralism,
Mhm.
not to pursue a policy of assimilation, which has been pursued for exactly 100 years, which has created the mess that we are in today, the mess that we've been facing for 50 years now.
Mhm.
For this reason, multiculturalism or pluralism, political, cultural, religious pluralism is very important for the future of the country. And thirdly, decentralization. That power has to be shared, not monopolized. Power has to be equally distributed between the people of Afghanistan, between the different communities, where every single citizen sees themselves part of policymaking and decision making.
Mhm.
One of the reasons why we have this vicious cycle of violence inside the country is when one group takes over, the other side feels marginalized. We should alleviate these concerns by all of us coming together and endorsing this idea that we should share power. Not the elite sharing power, the people, through a political structure that is defined within a constitutional framework.
Definitely. And final question on the recognition and the legitimacy of the NRF. The NRF has been attempting to prevent international recognition of the Islamic Emirate and position itself as the main political alternative to the Taliban through diplomatic lobbying in Europe and in the United States, most of which is your job. What would it actually take for Western governments to move from polite engagement to genuine political recognition of the resistance? And is there a risk that the NRF becomes permanently institutionalized as an opposition in exile, legitimate enough to be heard, but not powerful enough to govern within Afghanistan?
The NRF doesn't think it's the sole representative of Afghanistan's people, and we don't brand ourselves as a government to receive recognition.
Mm-hmm.
We believe we are a major player and a major part of the overall picture of the country.
Mm-hmm.
For this reason, we've invested our time and energy within the Vienna process for a democratic Afghanistan by bringing Afghanistan's political and civil forces from across the spectrum, people from all walks of life, to reach a consensus, and through that consensus and through that coalition for us to receive recognition and legitimacy and so forth. Because as I said in my previous response, Afghanistan doesn't belong to one group or one community. It belongs to all of its citizens. Our struggle is to bring that realization, whether it's inside Afghanistan or outside of Afghanistan. How can we come and contradict our own struggle by saying we should be the group to receive sole legitimacy? We are asking for support, of course, in this struggle and in this endeavor, but that's not seeking recognition as the sole representative of Afghanistan's people. When we have a referendum, when we have a true election, we can determine who represents the will of Afghanistan's people. And this is something we've asked the Taliban, that if you truly believe that you represent the will of Afghanistan's people, let's hold a referendum. Let's see if the people of Afghanistan endorse the idea of a democratic system where they have equal rights, or they endorse your exclusionary vision of the so-called Islamic Emirates, which we're seeing in practice today. But since day one, they've refused to do that. And every round of talks that we've had with them, they haven't given a persuasive response to this demand or to this request. And of course, we believe that the Taliban are part of the picture. At the end of the day, there should be negotiations. And we have to bring this realization, whether it's through political means to convince them or forcefully convince them that they should come and sit around the table with other representatives of Afghanistan's people, and for everyone to shape Afghanistan's future based on the will of Afghanistan's people. If they don't realize this peacefully, politically, then of course we're forced to use other means that can force them. I believe one of the mistakes after 2001 was not allowing the Taliban a seat around the table. The political forces of Afghanistan were in favor of this. It was the Bush administration back then that prevented it. Or else maybe 2021 wouldn't have happened. So our vision and our aims is for an Afghanistan where everyone is included. An Afghanistan that can represent the will of everyone, that everyone sees themselves part of the political process, and anyone can participate in politics as equal citizens.
Definitely. Well, that's all we have time for. So thank you again for coming and joining us on the Policy Pod podcast at the Blavatnik School of Government at the University of Oxford.
Thank you for having me.